Should Miami or Notre Dame get the final playoff spot? Now, look, this is all contingent on if BYU wins or loses. If BYU wins, both Miami and Notre Dame are most likely on the outside looking in. Now, currently, and it's kind of weird, we're even discussing this because Notre Dame is currently ranked ahead of Miami, barring a BYU upset over Texas Tech and something weird going on in the Alabama versus Georgia game. Currently, Notre Dame will get that last open slot. They'll be the 10th seed, which is the last open slot because you've got the two Power 5 winners, which would probably be UVA and North Texas maybe. Depends on who wins those games. I'm actually recording this during the game. But nonetheless, assuming everything goes according to plan, does Miami or Notre Dame get in? Now, currently, as I've mentioned, Notre Dame is 2 slots ahead of Miami, and neither of them have a game. So you would think in a normal world, it's obviously Notre Dame. Well, you thought wrong because the committee apparently says the teams that are not playing can move up or down. I don't know how that's possible. I mean, maybe you could say that, well, this team beat the SEC champ. Well, like this team beat Alabama, and then Alabama won the SEC championship, so that win looks better because the team they beat is now. It's so convoluted. I mean, it's so absurd that you could switch rankings after both teams are idle and they're not playing. But at the end of the day, the better team, it's probably Notre Dame. If we're totally being honest, if they rematched today, Notre Dame would be favored. If it was on the neutral site, Notre Dame would be favored. But that's not how we do playoffs. It's not how we do playoffs for the NFL, for the NBA, for really anything. It's like, look, these guys played. It's as simple as that. They played. Now, you might think that Miami got lucky. Miami was at home. And we do have to factor that in because it was a close game. So, maybe you don't give them full credit in terms of just slam dunk, better team. But look, the resumes are similar. They just are. Miami has one real win, which is over Notre Dame. And Notre Dame has one real win, which is over USC. And they have a lot of cupcake games. Notre Dame has been blowing out teams better than Miami, but look, at the end of the day, these teams are very similar. 2 losses. Notre Dame's losses were the better teams. Miami's losses were the worst teams, but it's like, I don't, people always say that you can have good losses to good teams. Well, it's like, Notre Dame played 2 real teams. Maybe you could count USC, but even in, let's say, real games they played, they're 1-2, and that's if you count USC. So I don't know if it's good to beat the bad teams and lose to the good teams because how are we going to trust you in the college football playoffs? And Miami lost to bad teams and only really played one real game, which was in week 1. So at the end of the day, if it's my decision, if we're taking Miami or Notre Dame for the last spot, Miami won the game. So I don't know how we can't tie break them over. Now, if they've got a different amount of wins, if one of them has a conference championship, which obviously Notre Dame can't have because they're not in a conference, but if Notre Dame was 11-1 and Miami was 10-2, then I think because the resumes are different, a one-loss team, if it was just the one loss in week 1 on the road, it's like we probably have to let Notre Dame slide in. But when they're 10-2, we even have the situation with Texas at 9-3, and they're not ahead of, I believe it's Oklahoma who they beat. That one's dicey because, you got 9-3 versus 10-2. Oklahoma's got solid wins, over Alabama, who might end up winning the SEC championship. So when it's a 10-2 versus 9-3, it's like, it's tough because, Texas has the better resume, in my opinion, and they have to win over Oklahoma. But Texas also has 3 losses. So that's where it does get dicey. But look, these teams both have 2 losses. I don't really care who the losses are to. I don't think it matters. Because, if you play 3 good teams, you lose to 3 good teams, but you beat everybody else, it's like, how can we trust you to beat good teams, So I would lean Miami. I think it makes more sense. We're not basing this off of projections. We're basing this off of reality. And reality indicates that Miami beat Notre Dame. These 2 teams played in week 1. And I think it would be a travesty to put in Notre Dame over Miami, considering Miami beat them. So I'd put Miami in if we're going off of resume, which I'm under the impression that was what we're deciding off of. Sporting leagues don't just say, okay, well, these are teams with the best ratings, or these are teams that have the highest odds to win the Super Bowl. No, they say, okay, here's tiebreaker 1, here's tiebreaker 2, et cetera, et cetera. Because if we're not going to go off tiebreakers and resume, then it's just going to be a continuous changing a revolving door of whichever school is the most corrupt and lobbies the hardest and makes the right phone calls and has the good connections. So Miami should be in.